You ever notice how the OSR didn't start because someone made a flashy new game? It started because the biggest name in tabletop had absolutely no idea what it was doing. And I don't mean WotC, which is of the coast. I mean TSR, the house that Gary built, absolutely tripping over its own feet through the 90s. Stick around. Today, we're digging into how TSR's collapse didn't just open the door for the OSR, it practically kicked it off its hinges. Let's get into it. TSR's collapse didn't happen overnight. By the early 90s, the company was drowning in endless product lines. My God, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Bloated settings, buckets of how do we sell this adventures. I probably have to do a whole video some point on Buck Rogers in the 25th century. A distribution model that punished overprinting and leadership that couldn't stop stepping on rakes. If you look at the pattern, it's classic. When a publisher stops understanding its audience, the cracks start showing. What gamers wanted was simple. Something playable, something consistent, something fun. What TSR delivered was here's our 6th box set of the year. And by the way, half of them are incompatible with each other. People forget this, but they were essentially grognards back in 93, saying exactly what OSR folks were saying in 2008. Can we just play D&D again without needing a degree or a second job to support the hobby? Then came the death spiral. TSR's collapse was a slow motion implosion. The company cut back on quality editing. They pretty much eliminated playtesting. They pumped out too many products by far. They picked fights with fans. Think about that. They chased collectible markets. Spellfire, anyone? Dragon Dice, anyone? They were like a dog chasing cars or turning the head for that squirrel that just went by. And then the lawsuits started. Oh boy. You know it's bad when your own fans are scared to talk about your game online because the company might threaten to sue them. Remember the days of the old netbooks? That's not a marketing strategy. That's a cry for help. When the gaming community starts to refer to TSR as they sue regularly, it may be a company that went a step or 12 too far. By 96, TSR was so deep in debt that stores wouldn't order new products because they were still stuck with the old stuff and hadn't sold. The company that defined tabletop RPGs couldn't pay its printer. That's not misfortune. That's failure at the corporate level. So, when WotC swooped in and bought TSR in 97, it wasn't just a corporate acquisition. It was quite literally triage. Wizards basically said, let's save the brand. Cut the bloat, bring some sanity back. And honestly, for a while they did. But the damage was already done. TSR's collapse had taught the fan base a very clear lesson. You can't trust a big publisher to protect the game you love. People saw firsthand how fast your game can become their intellectual property problem. And that seed, that distrust, that became the soil the OSR grew in. So fast forward a few years, The early internet starts buzzing with old school forums, blogs, DIY content. Dragon's Foot, Knights and Knaves, OD&D 76, EN World. There was Grognard's there too. Gary himself used to post and answer questions on EN World. And of course, the classic, the early OSR blog roll. People weren't chasing nostalgia. They were rediscovering playability. They were saying, remember when D&D was weird and deadly and simple? You remember rulings, not rules? Remember when a 32-page booklet, Greylock, gave you a whole campaign world? TSR had left a huge vacuum. WotC, at the time, was focused in its own new direction. And in that gap, fans started saying, well, we could make our own, right? And that's where the OSR actually begins, not with the retroclones, but with the mindset. The publishers won't make the game we want, we'll do it ourselves. And of course, everything exploded when the OGL hit, the first real retroclones. Osric, Basic Fantasy, Labyrinth Lord. They didn't just replicate old rules, they were acts of preservation. They were fans saying, we're keeping this alive, whether or not the owners care. TSR's collapse created a generation of gamers who no longer trusted corporations to maintain the soul of the hobby they loved. The OGL gave them the legal way to act on that feeling. You put those two together and boom. The OSR becomes a movement. And the future was then and now. So what's the takeaway? TSR's collapse didn't inspire the OSR. It essentially necessitated it. The OSR is what happens when corporate oversight collapses, fans are left holding the torch, people rediscover the joy of simple play. And the community, not the publisher, becomes the custodian of D&D's past. If TSR hadn't fallen apart, we might never have gotten the blur of creativity we saw from 2006 to 2015 and further on to today. Right? Think about it. No retroclones. In my case, no Swords and Wizardry Light. No DIY zines. No Tenkar's Tavern as we know it. Blog, community, YouTube channel. Sometimes when the giant falls, the rest of us finally get room to build something better. Now, if you enjoyed this little dive into history, hit the like button. Maybe leave a comment about when you first noticed something was off with TSR back in the day. And next Sunday, the plan is we're digging into the early OSR blogosphere. The wild, unfiltered frontier where the OSR really found its voice. Until then, be safe, be well, and God bless. And remember, the beer is always cold, the dice are always hot, and the OSR belongs to all of us, not the companies that let it slip away. Be good.